the incoming president just posted on his Truth Social. This epic ceasefire agreement could only have happened as a result of our historic victory in November, as it signaled to the entire world that my administration would seek peace and negotiate deals to ensure the safety of all Americans and our allies. I am thrilled American and Israeli hostages will be returning home to be reunited with their families and loved ones. With this deal in place, my national security team, through the efforts of Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, will continue to work closely with Israel and our allies to make sure Gaza never, all caps, again becomes a terrorist safe haven. We will continue promoting, again, all caps, peace through strength throughout the region as we build upon the momentum of this ceasefire to further expand the historic Abraham Accords. This is only the beginning of great things to come in America and indeed the world. We have achieved so much without even being in the White House. Just imagine all the wonderful things that will happen when I return to the White House and my administration is fully confirmed so they can secure more victories to the United States. Before we go to our next guest, I want to ask to hear from potentially the incoming Secretary of State. At his very own hearing today, was asked about Gaza and the war there. Let's watch Marco Rubio on a potential hostage deal.
Do you agree that a permanent ceasefire in Gaza absolutely must include the release of those hostages?
Well, it must include it because if it doesn't, there won't be a ceasefire for long. That is the linchpin of what's happened now. Hamas has been severely degraded, but these people, that include a number of American citizens, need to be home as soon as possible, and that will remain a priority in any engagement that we're involved in with regards to not just a ceasefire, but some permanent peace process moving forward.
Now, we have been reporting that it is not unlikely that Marco Rubio would become the next Secretary of State. He's having a smooth day so far. We've been picking up some sound and clips for you and playing those when we can. But he is one of 6 people today who are in confirmation hearings, pulling Trump's vision potentially into place. And you see the imminence with which, particularly those people who will handle our diplomacy and our fighting forces, those people are very important all the time, but particularly now, if part of this deal is going to release hundreds of killers that we know of as terrorists in the Middle East back onto the open market for themselves. I want to bring in a man who knows this very well. He is the former U.S. ambassador to Israel, David Friedman. And Ambassador, you and I were together the day that Donald Trump in his first term moved the embassy, importantly, from a political location from some in the world to its home city, Jerusalem. As you watch this now, tie it all together for me, the journey that we've taken in the last 466 days since this war began.
Well, Harris, thanks for having me. And what I would say is that when, God willing, that first picture emerges of a hostage being reunited with his or her family, I will be in tears. 10 million Israelis will be in tears, and probably hundreds of millions of other people around the world will be in tears. It's been that traumatic and difficult, and my enduring thanks to my old friend, who I knew could do this, President Trump, for getting this done. It's so important to so many people.
Look, I want to quote a guest that we had on a few moments ago with Kaylee Shahrazani. He said something that made such an impression on me. As long as Hamas is in power, war will never end. So he said whether the ceasefire potentially would last 42 days or whatever it would last, Hamas is going to do what it does until Hamas is no longer.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important point, because some people, I think, are misinterpreting this as some kind of a capitulation to Hamas or an agreement that Hamas can continue to rule the Gaza Strip. Well, President Trump, first of all, I was hearing his comment just in real time as you put it out. He put the words "never again" in capital letters, that never again will Hamas rule the Gaza Strip, and I think that's important. And you know, when you think about this team that President Trump has assembled, of course, his own words themselves. You heard Mike Waltz earlier today say that the Hamas has to be decapitated. You heard Your colleague Pete Hegseth testifying yesterday that he supported the killing of every single member of Hamas. You heard future Secretary Marco Rubio saying that there'll never be a ceasefire if Hamas stays in power. You've got Brian Mast, who's the incoming leader of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. When he was asked, where do you stand on Hamas? He said, I stand on their throats. So there is no ambiguity here that there's no future for Hamas. And frankly, I think it's the recognition by Hamas that their days are numbered, that there is no future for them that caused them to make a deal today that frankly, people had thought they agreed to 7 months ago, but apparently weren't willing to do. So I think this is all because of their recognition that with the incoming administration, they have no future.
Well, they cut it close. We're 5 days away. Can you just stay with me for a moment? There are two things that are playing out simultaneously that are a little unbelievable. So on the left of your screen in Tel Aviv, there is the celebration of hope and anticipation that hostages will soon be freed. On the right side, they are celebrating in Gaza. Let's listen to Gaza for a moment. Yeah, I was told we would have the sound of that. Let me know to the team when we do. Ambassador Friedman, what are they celebrating?
I mean, this is probably being sold to them as some sort of a victory. And look, it's hard. It's hard for Israelis to watch the people, the Hamas supporters celebrating. But that celebration is going to be short-lived. I mean, right now this is about getting the hostages back, and Israel's paying a high price to get them back. But, Israel's not agreeing to end the war. Hamas has no future. And I'm hoping, I'm skeptical, but I'm hoping that maybe some of them are celebrating the possibility that Hamas is coming to an end. That with this, Hamas loses its leverage, and maybe someone can come in and rule the Gaza Strip, which is less malign. But I'm not a very good psychologist into the minds of these people.
Yeah. I was hoping to get some audio, but now we have a little bit more light on the situation. They are on each other's shoulders and looking jubilant. And as you say, wait, we can hear some of it now. Ask you just real quickly, Ambassador, if you could understand any of what was being said, and if you think that what you think this is now that you can hear some of it.
I'm not sure, but again, their only source of information is what Hamas tells them. Right. So, maybe they're being told by Hamas because, again, this is going to end up being a defeat for Hamas. It may take 6 weeks. It may take another year, before this is all cleaned up. But this will end up in a defeat for Hamas. Maybe the Hamas is spinning this to their people that somehow, they're going to remain in power, and maybe that's their narrative. But it's not. It's going to be short-lived.
My colleague Charles Payne is here with a question for you, Ambassador.
Ambassador, thank you very much. The Biden administration initially gave so many mixed signals on this that in many ways, I felt, at least as an outside observer, it emboldened Hamas. We know President Trump will not do that. Will there be a way, Sun Tzu's talks about an avenue for your adversaries to retreat. What kind of efforts are being made, if you can talk about it, to at least find sensible people in Gaza that understand that the path they're on now means total destruction, and that if they do want to rise up, because there has to be a lot of dissatisfied people there, they will get some help from Israel and perhaps the United States so that they can take control of their nation, and it's not Hamas who's once again leading them down this path to destruction where they put hospitals, babies, and everything else in the line of danger.
Well, Charles, it begins with the eradication of Hamas. As long as Hamas is there, it's absolutely impossible for anybody to rise up who will put the interests of his people and his children ahead of the grievances of the past, ahead of the hatred for Israel. So as long as Hamas is there, it's virtually impossible. But the key point here, as you talked about the difference between Biden and Trump, the key word is daylight. There was massive daylight between Biden and Israel over the last 15 months. And every time Hamas saw that daylight, it empowered them and made them think that they can hang in there, that they could potentially emerge victorious and in control. The loss of life was meaningless to them. That's part of their battle strategy, so they didn't care about that. Trump comes in and the daylight's completely shut, right? It's shut by his words. It's shut by the words of his team. And that's the first step. The coalition between Israel, the rock solid, hand in hand, no daylight relationship between Israel and America is what gets this started, at least the eradication of Hamas. But it's not, there's no quick fix, Charles. I wish there was. You got to get rid of these terrorists before the decent people can emerge.
Former U.S. Ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, thank you very much for your time and expertise. And always, we love Israel. We pray for the best.
Yeah.